Welcome to the unedited raw footage of Arachne. What you're about to see is all of the glory of the Arachne podcast without any of the editing and manages to include all of the bloopers and stupid things that we say that doesn't actually manage to make it to the main part of the show. Thanks for checking out our channel and enjoying any ramblings while you're painting or need to be distracted. We appreciate everything you guys do when you consume our content and all the little things we just make. And all I have to say is thanks for listening, Arachnids. So, hey, stop me if you've heard this one. Can someone please tell me what LGBTQ plus stands for? I can't seem to get a straight answer. It's pretty bad. It's really bad. Oh, God. Hello, Arachnids. This is your host, D to the D, Dr. D, reaching out through the supervision-free source of Napoleonic coding. Yeah, the continental system didn't work out so well. I am joined today by the newest crewmate to plunder the Spanish main, and in this case, Europe, Rufus, who is the creator of Blood and Bayonets for or from Firelock. I'm not entirely sure how all that works, but welcome to the show, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
So it's an absolute privilege. I love having game creators and authors come on here just because you guys have a much more like behind the curtains view of how all these game systems and all that work. So it's really cool to have you guys, you kinds of guys on here. But a couple things at the top of this show. This episode will probably be the first videoed episode that we put on YouTube. We tried to do it a long time ago and something happened to the recording or whatever. So if you're very into the idea of watching unedited people talking into microphones while there's not great visuals going on, you can go ahead and go to the YouTube channel, which is Arachnid. Arachne the Gaming channel or something like that. We're going to be doing a rebrand here pretty soon. I'm probably going to do it right after this episode. So you'll probably have already noticed that, I would hope. So if you are interested in long form content where you just hear people rambling and not getting to the point, that's going to be there. So if you want to listen to it while you're painting or whatever, because you got a lot of Napoleonic boys you're going to have to be painting here. A lot of reds, a lot of blues, a lot of fancy yellows and stuff like that, and a lot of brass going on. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, go ahead and go to that channel. I'm going to try and link it in the description of this episode if you're curious about that. And of course, we got to thank our patrons today on Arachne. See, I'm already rambling. I'm already losing where I am. I want to thank our patrons: Cyril S, Derek S, Quinn B, Nick B, and Aleph is the way. Can't do the show without you. Really, really appreciate it. ProfessionalCasual.com on Patreon, and that stuff really helps us do stuff like the YouTube content because it helps pay for all the recording crap we need for this stuff. And Arachne is part of the Professional Casual Network. If you'd like to support the network, please sign up at Patreon or purchase some hot swag at streamlabs.com. Professional Casual Network 1. Hopefully you're going to have some new stuff for our channel specifically. Hopefully the Raise the Black logo will be on there, and the new little baby spider that is going to be the new Arachne logo, and keep your eyes open for it. I've really enjoyed it. It's a little chibi spider. It's a little baby spider. So I really hope you guys like that. I personally am sponsored by Monument Hobbies. If you like really good paints, go ahead and use the code Professional Casual checkout to get yourself a swanky discount. And if you want to watch people like me use that fancy paint on the stream, go to Professional Casual on Twitch. We're usually there on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays. Monday is turning into a battle report type day. Hopefully Blood and Bayonets will be on there as soon as the rulebook's out. Get my greasy little hands on there. And I grab onto it, and hopefully we'll get some people standing in squares and blasting at each other in no time. Bayonet Dice makes some of the coolest dice in the biz. They do have stuff for Firelock now if you are interested in those kinds of dice, which are mostly D10s. They absolutely look gorgeous. I really like the Dutch ones myself. Use the code Arachne at checkout to get yourself a 5% discount. And of course, we cannot forget about our sponsor, Mr. Laser at mrlaser.square.site, who makes a bunch of really fancy stuff. Maybe we can make some Firelock stuff with him, but I'll talk to him about that later. All right, so enough about business. Let's start getting to the meat and potatoes of this. So, Rufus, I have heard through the grapevine that you made a rule set called Blood and Bayonets, and I know that you made it with your son, if I am correct in assuming that. One of the things that I always like to do with people who come on this show is that kind of stuff I think people really, really die for because they don't hear it from anywhere else. I always like to ask people, hey, what is your nerd origin story? So, Rufus, it's your turn to embarrass yourself on the wider web. Go ahead. And actually, before I ask the question, if you're watching the visual part of this, we did notice that there's a few little interruptions that were going on in the recording. So if you notice it stand still, it might not be you. Don't panic. It should fix itself. But Rufus, run through it, sir. What is your nerd origin story? Go.
Yeah, well, my father was always supportive of me as a kid, with games, but he didn't actually play them. So I remember my first, my kind of eye-opening thing to it was my dad took me to the the Battle of New Orleans in New Orleans, and I saw the uniforms, and I was probably like 12 at this time, and I was just absolutely fascinated. I was like, "What's up with that? Like those look super cool." And so I started, looking into it, learning about Napoleonics, learning about the. I'm a big uniform guy. I'm a big painter. I really, and if you like uniforms, that's the period. There's hands down. That's the amazing period. So I would go to a local store. At that time, it was all 15 millimeter Napoleonics, and my father bought me a bunch, and I painted them all up, and I brought them to the store. And all the old farts there just basically ignored me because I was a 12-year-old kid, and they didn't want anything to do with me. And unfortunately, that you know percolates through the hobby sometimes. I think it's kind of a myth today, but there are those like, get out of here, kid, kind of people. So then I didn't know what to do. And then I discovered BattleTech, which came out. That box set came out when I was about 13. So me and my buddies could do the standees. We got into that. And then as I progressed, I was always a heavy painter, but not a player as much. And then when I got a little older, as a young adult, I knew about 40K and stuff like that. But then I discovered the whole tournament scene and I got into that for a while. And then, bolt action historicals, and then with Blood and Plunder, I met in Miami. I'm from Miami. There's one gaming store in Dade County. Dade County has almost 7 million people in it. They got one gaming store at the time. And so that's where a lot of the core people in Firelock Games, we used to play games together. We used to play Flames of War, um, BattleTech, obviously. We still play BattleTech to this day. And so we sort of met each other, and then I retired, and once I retired, I got into I always wanted to write games, and so then I had the opportunity to do it. And then my son, who at the time was probably 19 years old. This is my older son. I have two sons. My older son's into it. My younger son, not so much. He just thinks we're dorks, basically. And when he does play games with us, he usually beats us. So go figure that one out. So I was actually percolating around in my pool, as a Florida guy, because I live up in Orlando now, percolating around. And my son came up with the idea of doing a World War I skirmish level game, which turned into Blood and Valor. That's the first game I wrote, which has the expansion. It has two books. It covers the Russian Civil War and basically the whole world. During that time period. So I started working with Firelock Games. I started painting a lot of their miniatures in the Blood and Plunder books. I've painted, or my son's painted. He's become a good painter. Obviously, when he was a little younger, he didn't paint it, but I started doing it. And one of my main motivations was so I could show off to my buddies, like, I painted it, and show them the color. Like, you want to ask me what color that was, and I wouldn't tell them, stuff like that. So that progressed into getting more involved with Firelock Games. And my main function with them is I go to the cons. I like to represent the games. We go up as a group. They give me a room and a hotel, and so they don't really pay me like that. And just be involved in it because I enjoy that and stuff like that. And then I think we were driving back from, I think it was Gen Con like a year ago, a little over like a year and a half ago. And we were talking about, other places to go with Firelock Games and what other ideas and my degree in college is a history degree, and it focused on Napoleonic history.
Mm-hmm.
Am I the quintessential expert on Napoleonic history? No, but I am familiar enough with the area to write a rule set, Um, and I have an extensive library already in my house. As my son said, who's in college, I have a better Napoleonic library in my garage than the college, and uniform books and all that kind of stuff. Which is
Sure.
probably true because I've been collecting, anything about Napoleon for 40 years since I was a kid. And I basically told Mike Tunez, he's the main guy at Firelock. He goes to Firelock every day, like an actual job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, dude, I could do this. I could crank this book out, and so that started, the idea of it. And by the time I got back, back to Orlando, I started painting up some demo armies because I'm a prolific painter. So I cranked out a whole, ton of dudes. and it's not just the minimum you need for an army. I'm going to have like so I can make 10 different combinations of a force, so I can play test them all and
Yeah.
play
Yeah.
test all kinds of different things.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, and then the Kickstarter came out in February, and we're should be delivered by the end of this month or
Excellent.
September. Yeah, we're September 1st now, so we're less than a year. I know there's some cranky guys on Facebook like this is ridiculous. It's taking too long, and I'm like, well, you're obviously not super familiar with the way Kickstarters work. If you can do a Kickstarter in less than a year, you're probably ahead of the curve on that. You're
Mm-hmm.
doing pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But the book is it's at the U.S. printer. And we went with the U.S. printer because Blood and Valor we printed in the U.S. And at that time, unfortunately, it costs more than printing in China, and the quality's less. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like a double. Like, what are we doing? Like, we're paying more for less quality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we found another printer that they did a reprint of Blood and Crowns, which is the 100 Years War version,
Mm-hmm.
and the reprint looks just like the original print. So it costs
Sweet.
a little more, but not excessive amount. And then the logistics of not having to cross borders, not having to sit on
Yeah.
a container ship, not having to bob around, and just the time. So the printers in Texas. So we're hoping. Well, it should.
Oh.
We're not hoping it should be a 3-week turnaround, and we'll
Oh,
have the book in
sweet.
our hands. Yeah, yeah. It.
And I think a lot of people forget about that when it comes to playing with our dollies. Is these things? If you think about a single miniature, all right, let's just talk about a single French Fusilier. Maybe it's made of metal. Let's just say it's made in some factory in China. That little model that costs you, let's just say hypothetical, maybe back in the day, you're paying like 450 for a single Fusilier. That thing has to be made in China. You have to get all the metal from all the different parts of like the mines. You got to put it in a box, send all those
Yeah.
boxes to a factory. They got to mix it, pour it into a thing in some super heated way, which probably costs like $1 million in electrical power to melt this metal, to press it into a machine, to put it into another little tinier box with a bunch of other little guys that are just like it, and ship that thing across the world. And
Mhm.
then they complain about when it costs like, $10.
Well,
It's like,
yeah,
guy.
$10 or $12. Yeah. Yeah, then well, you could get into all the whole, with pewter. That's one of the reasons we used to spin cast and firelock with pewter.
Mm-hmm.
But pewter, and some people like, oh, I really like pewter. I like the metal and the lead. But
Yep.
one of the problems from a manufacturing point of view with pewter is the pewter market flux. The material cost fluctuates wildly. So you
Yeah.
could be making $4 profit one day, and then a month later you're making 10 cents, and so it's where other things like resin or even hard plastics are much more. Hard plastics cost a lot to cut the molds, but once you got it cut, the
Mm-hmm.
material cost is very, very small. And 3D prints, resin material costs are pretty stable. So and Firelock's really gone to that. They have a lot of plastic kits, but they've also gone to 3D printing. Like they have these,
Yeah.
monster industrialized 3D printers. Well, the trick to them, I don't know how familiar you are with 3D printers,
Mm-hmm.
but the trick to the ones at Firelock is the resolution's not so much better than one you could buy privately on the market, for a reasonable
Mm-hmm.
amount of money. Like I have an Anycubic that's, it prints, it's like 6K, it prints great,
Yep.
But the thing is, when I print on one flat thing,
Yeah.
where the Firelock ones, you can stack it. So say you have 30 guys,
Crazy.
and then you go 30, 30, 30, 30. So now you've print, 150 guys in one run, and then you can pop them all out. So that's one of the big differences. So you could, and as a person at home, do you need to print 150 dudes one shot? Probably
Probably
not.
not.
You can probably just run 3 or 4 prints through of 30 guys, and you're fine. But it's kind of cool how it works. So they've gone to that, and the resin they use, I don't know if you've ever seen it, is super durable stuff.
Oh
So
yeah, I paint.
yeah,
Brother, I paint so much of their stuff. It's crazy.
yeah, you could like throw it on the ground and something
Yeah.
bounces and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
The
know,
only things that ever really even seem to want to break are just some of the swords and stuff with
yeah,
weird
well,
angles. Like, but
but
that's any
that's
game. It's
if you had pewter or plastic, that could happen
yeah,
too. It's a
100%.
little skinny stick.
And
So
I will say, I have used all of their materials. I've painted their metal models, I've painted their plastic ones, and I've painted their resin ones. And I can say unequivocally, their metal models are thirsty models. They want paint, and that metal just absorbs paint like no tomorrow. And
Mhm.
it requires so many more layers and all that. And I'm a huge metal model guy. I'm one of
Right,
those
right,
guys that like you find those old GW models, you're just like, oh my god, these are hideous. I need them right now.
right.
I'll
Yeah,
give you $80 for this.
like
And
the ones that were hand sculpted. They're not like
yes, yeah, yeah, for sure. And when I started using their plastic ones, I think their plastic models serve a really good purpose because it gives people a very cheap entryway into playing their
Mhm.
games, like the sailor kit and the natives kit and all that. And it just gives you the numbers
Right.
to like bulk out and play it. And the resin ones, I think, is peak. I do think that their resin models retain the detail of the metal models while also, I think, making it sharper in a lot of ways. And
Mhm.
I do think that it's just the best models to buy from them. Like I'm probably not going to
Well,
buy their plastic kits evermore because I just love their resins way too much.
yeah, we just my son just painted their whole 2.0 version of the line. They've redone
Hmm.
all their resin models. They have two in shop, in-house 3D modelers.
Hmm.
So we just went through and painted the whole line again. I painted the whole line like 7, 8 times now. It's kind
Sure,
of crazy,
sure.
but they paint well. And when I say that,
Yes.
I spent a lot of time talking with the 3D modelers. Um, there is a level of making models that, when I say paint well, it's like if there's a strap, right, and you raise it higher than it would be realistically if it was a full size person.
Hmm.
But if you're painting that strap, you can pick up a highlight and really make it look cool because it's got a
Yep.
good definition from the body.
Yep.
And I talked to Daniel and our two. We really stress that kind of thing. And then their faces, like if you blow those faces up to a real person's face, they look like a mutant. But you
Yeah.
want like big nose and like big cheekbones. So when you paint it on that level, it pops. You can see it. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I
Look
know
at
you probably painted a model where all the straps and stuff are kind of smooth and really not
Yeah.
all high relief, and it
Yep.
makes it almost like you have to hand draw the lines, and it's
Yep.
super, it's irritating. So I did think of that, and we thought of that when we were discussing it. And their new line is really, it's kind of cool. Like how some of the pants have stripes.
Yep.
Well,
Mostly the Dutch ones, I
they have
think.
the stripe lines kind of defined in the pants now, so you could
Yeah.
pick them out more easily if you're painting. So it just, you don't have to kind of eyeball the stripes. So just,
Yep.
little things that make it easier.
And the
So,
good news is that even people who don't want to go into that kind of depth, like they can just paint over it
oh
most of
no,
the
you
time.
just
You
paint it
just
over
like
and,
go,
and wash it, and it'll look fine. Yeah, you could just
looks
paint it
great.
regular. Yeah, you don't have to make those stripes, or stuff like that.
And that's the
So,
glorious thing about playing historical games is no one will ever poo-poo you for just putting a base coat and washing it. And as long as you got kind of roughly the colors in the right spot, most of the time
right.
people are going to be like, "That's good enough for me."
Hey,
Especially when you're playing Napoleonics.
unless it's
And we're going to talk about
Napoleonic.
that in a second, the scale of your game. But
Oh my
most
god,
Napoleonic
dude.
battles are like, let's do all of Austerlitz, every single regiment and
Yeah,
division standing in the right
yeah,
spot roughly, and then let's roll dice. So I guess in that case, it leads well into the next question. So when it comes to Blood and Bayonets, in a nutshell, whenever anybody talks about Napoleonic gaming, I think that the first thing that usually comes up, or the first couple things that usually come up, are one, frontage, and two, what is the scale of it? So every
right.
single model, how many men is this model supposed to represent? And if he dies, or like, are you even going to take models off of it? Like, is the thing
Yeah.
not representative of that? Go ahead and run through that. I'm sure people are very interested in that if they're going to
Well,
pick up
I
another
always
Napoleonic game.
thought there was a missing niche in Napoleonics where, it's either you play huge, which you play these giant battles, or they make these kind of quirky skirmish ones where it's like each guy's an individual, but the majority of them are huge, right? So I'm a big believer in what I call modern wargaming, not gentleman wargaming, where gentleman wargaming is, we're going to set up the battle, as you said, Austerlitz. We're going to replay it, and then we're going to discuss how it was different.
Hmm.
Like, hey, he came in earlier, you did something different. We're not really so worried about, hey, I won or you lost. It's like, oh, we had a historical result. That's great.
Yep. Yep.
That's kind of cool in a convention, whatever. But for me personally, I'm kind of like, I want to do stuff different. Like, I know how it came out historically. I also wanted to make a game that's accessible to people. So that's the modern wargaming side. You can
Yep.
play it in an afternoon or an evening, no problem. You're talking 2 hours, maybe three if you're going to make fun of each other through the whole thing. Like the banter side of it.
Yep.
And
It's a natural course of how this should
yeah, well,
work.
that's a big part of this hobby is making fun of everybody. It's important. The play one thing that I do is the 3 foot depth,
Mhm.
so it fits on your dining room table. That's the idea behind that. Once you get to the 4 feet, most people's tables aren't 4 feet across. So
Yep.
now you have to have a special built gaming table to play the games on. And some people have that, of course, like I do. But it's just one. I'm just trying to make it as accessible as possible to players. Um, so the scale, the idea of the scale is each guy is an individual guy.
Sweet.
Okay, the concept is you're in charge of, like, you're going out and you're sending like a group of dudes out to go do like a small level mission to grab supplies, to protect a
Mhm.
courier, to do something, and then you run into the enemy when you're on the way. So you have maybe 40, 50, 60 guys. So that's the
Yep.
size of an army, 40, 50, 60 guys, which is about the same size as Blood and Plunder, about
Yep.
the same size as Blood and Bayonets, which is pretty close to a lot of other games, like even Bolt Action. You're talking
Yep.
50. And even for 40K today, the model counts aren't as huge. They've lowered the model counts. They can just get more wounds. But instead
Yep.
of having, have a 3 wound model instead of 3 models with 1 wound.
Yep. I
But
agree
the
with that.
idea is that you can paint a force up, build a force, and because they're historicals, nothing can be copyrighted. You can literally buy a box of Perry's or Vitrix and basically make a whole force out of the thing, or darn near a whole force, and then you might get some little extras, put them out on the table, and actually play the game, pointed out. And one of the other big differences too is you point them out. Where most Napoleonics are recreating these big giant battles, so you bring the troops that existed,
Yep.
regardless of who's better off or who's more powerful. So one person's always. It's like doing Rock's Drift with the Zulus and the English. One guy's gonna have to paint a whole shit ton of Zulus, while the other guy just paints like 100 English dudes, and one guy
Right.
paints 4,000 dudes. It's like, and then inherently it's out of balance. So my concept is I wanted you to be able to you just tell your buddy, hey, I'll meet you at the store, bring 250 points of Blood and Bayonets. It doesn't matter if they're English and I got English and we all got French, whatever you want. We
Yep.
can throw it on the table. We roll up a scenario. We can play the game. Or if you want to say, hey, let's meet up on the weekend and we're going to recreate a section of a battle,
Hmm.
and I've been painting like a furious madman, and I have all the cool proper, name regiments and all that stuff represented. You can do that. You can go big. The other test we always do, which is a litmus test of all of our games, is all our games can be played in a tournament.
Yep.
So if your game can't be played in a tournament, that means your rules are loose. I like
Yep.
tight rules, no confusing, and everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows the rules, and then you play the game, and then it's your tactical acumen. There's some luck involved, of course, but there's your tactical acumen. Is can you offset anything that happened bad during the game and win the game?
You're talking romantic to me when it comes to that like tight rule set to
Well,
actually like play an event.
yeah,
You
yeah,
you
but
just
no
you're being
Napoleonic
flirty.
set that I know of does that. Where you can just, hey, bring your points. A lot of
Yep.
games, and I've read tons of rules, have a point system, but it's kind of soft. It's sort of
Yeah.
like, eh. The other element we did, which I think is truly unique in Napoleonic games, is we have a full naval element to the game, and we have the amphibious element. And I've heard guys say, well, why would you have amphibious? Well, in the peninsula, the British were known, and I have these special characters in the game,
Mhm.
for taking groups of guerrillas along the coast and dropping them off to go raid with some British Marines, and then they come back on the ship and haul butt. Well, that happened all over the place. So you could represent that in Blood and Bayonets. Now, do you want to play with the victory and, you want to redo the Battle of Trafalgar? You could if you're a maniac, but it's probably, I've seen there. No, I've seen guys do it, but that's something that's just beyond like the normal. Hey, we're going to play this in an afternoon.
Yep.
This is going to be,
Yep.
hey, I'm going to work on this for the next 2 years and set it all up. It could be done, but here, I'll hold it up. I don't know. Can you see the ship?
Sure can.
All right, this is a really cool 3D print that what's his name, Harris made. I can't remember his freaking first name. Forrest Harris's kid made
Hmm.
this. This is about as big of a ship as you would get in this game. This is
Yeah, that makes
probably
sense.
almost 2 feet long, just slightly bigger.
It's a schooner. Looks like a schooner.
This would be a topsail schooner. It's a topsail sloop, it's called. But
Yep.
it doesn't have a ton of cannons. It's maybe 18 inches long. It's probably a little oversized. When we make the ships for blood and plunder and stuff, we don't. We make them a little wider than they should be
Yeah.
realistically, and we
Yeah.
flatten out the decks more so you can,
Yep.
for gameplay because it's a game
Yep.
piece versus a model. But see, something like that you can play, and a lot of the ships that already exist in Blood and Plunder can be used. But there's these maniacs, and I don't know if you've seen them on Discord that have
I sure have. I was just about to bring it up.
they 3D printed. This is Jack Tar Miniatures. He's the one who made this, But
Yep.
they have them there, but the way the ships are set up in the game, if you want to 3D print that sucker out and put it on the table, you can fit it within the rules. It's
Sure.
not like you have to make rules to make it work. No, it works within the game. And that's another thing that's kind of cool about Firelock games in general. Is like this. Like Blood and Plunder, they have a whole line of miniatures, and the reason they did that is though they didn't really exist in the real world, But they have a whole line of miniatures. But if you have your own, old foundry, like goofy looking pirates from the 1970s, that's what you got. That's your game. That's what you own. You can play with those. It's not against the
Yep.
rules, and that's the beauty of the Napoleonic stuff is you can use a million different. There's tons of different lines. That's why we didn't make a line in Napoleonics. We didn't make a line of 100 Years War guys. We didn't make a line of the World War One guys because they exist.
Yep.
So we're going to make the book. We're going to make things that match, and then you can collect them and give. There's Perry's, there's Vitrix,
Yep.
there's tons, and then there's tons of metal ones, and there's all kinds of stuff you can do. So you can bring those over and play with them. So
And
it's not like you have to use. I've had people ask me that in tournaments. Hey, do we have to use your models? No, you don't.
yeah,
And we've had people come up and show us really goofy stuff. But
I can only imagine. The
yeah,
only thing I would say, as long as you attempt to get a relatively close base size, because the 20 millimeter base for the Firelock games is a little bit unique in the
it's weird.
regards that
Yeah. Well, I can tell
most
you
games use 25s.
the
But the
reasoning
smallest,
behind that. Like Blood and Valor uses 25s.
yeah,
When Blood and Valor I went with 25s, 60 millimeter,
machine guns or whatever.
teams, which is really standard.
Yep.
It's the same as bolt action. I thought of that.
Yep.
Like why not? Why make it harder for people? The reason we went with 20s is they fit better on the ships.
Right.
Because if it fits, it's good. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. So the unit that you're in has to fit on the ship. If it sits, it fits, or whatever the hell that thing is.
Yeah. Go
So,
cat logic.
but that being said, that really only parlays to ship combat. So if you want to play
Right.
Blood and Bayonets, like there's a buddy of mine that has all of his stuff based on 25s. It doesn't matter. It's fine. It's no big deal. You just say, okay, you guys are on 25, but I'm on 20. If you want to be pedantic about it, you just spread your guys out a little bit more to even it up, whatever you want to do.
Yep.
That's one of the things. It's not like you don't have to be a super stickler for it because the idea is I don't want to create barriers for people to play the game. I want to make it harder to play. I've had some people say, hey, my guys are, based on a lot of like the, what is it? Black Powder does 40 mil base with 4 guys on it.
Yep.
Could you play this like that? Sure. You just have to put wound markers on your bases. It could be done. Especially if your opponent's playing the same way, then you're gold.
Yep.
The other thing with the other one was the cavalry. The cavalry 25 by 50s, just like, and they can be pills. They can be rectangles. The other thing you notice in a lot of my videos and stuff, I put them on movement trays.
Yep.
They have 20 mil movement trays. I just do that for ease of gameplay. You know what I'm saying? It's not you're not required to have a movement tray. Yeah, you have a movement tray. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And they are from Phalanx Games. They have 20 millimeter circle and
Phalanx Consortium. Yeah, that's where I get them with the 20s. The only thing you got to kind of when you get them, you got to route them out a little bit because they're so cut close that when you paint the edge of your base, it doesn't really. You got to kind of give them a little Dremel tool work in the middle. But that's it. That's the concept is, a relatively small size. a relatively, you can get them on the table relatively quickly. You can have a fun game. You can play it in tournaments. You can recreate actual battles. There's rules in the book for multiplayer. There's even solo play rules because that was a response to
Yep.
COVID, and we started putting solo play rules into the books because there are people that like the or they just don't have the access to other nerds to play with. It's
You could
sometimes
say it. You could say you won't get in trouble. They like to play with themselves. It's fine.
yeah, well, whatever. Yeah.
We're adults here. we know how
The
self
other
logic works.
thing, with and I know I saw when you're, like a lot of people have asked me why did you go with the Peninsula War and what's the concept of that? And one thing I wanted to do is I realized in the Peninsula War, one, that's a marketing thing. It's like doing a World War II game without Americans. It's just
Right.
it just doesn't make any sense. Like or do like, hey, I'm going to do World War II, but I'm going to just do Poles and Germans and Russians, and then we'll do the next book will be Americans. Stupid. The people that buy these games that are people in the UK. There are other people in Europe that buy them, but obviously UK is a big part of it, and America is a big part of it.
Yep.
So if you're going to do, where would you start? The Peninsula, because you have the British there. The British all love, the Duke of Wellington, and they get all excited.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
do find a lot of the authors I've read, they barely mention the Spanish, and I'm like, they were kind of there, but they're like, yeah, whatever.
In their own country, hanging. They were just hanging out, having beers, watching
Some of the
everything.
old books, like there's one I have that would describe the Spanish as every time the Spanish fired their muskets, the sound of their muskets would scare them, and they drop them and run away.
Yeah, for
I don't
sure.
know if they were quite that incompetent. They probably were, the Spanish soldiers, I wouldn't, they probably were not cowards. Were they supported well? No. Was their leadership crappy? Yes. Was their
So
cavalry horrible? Yes.
yes,
But they
something that
fought.
I read.
They fought a lot. They were involved. They didn't just give
Yes,
up.
they were. Most of the time, yeah. I like how in the book, in books anyway, they say that the Spanish's main like goal in that entire war was that they just distracted the French. Like they never really won, but they just forced the French to like send people at them so they would stop, they keep them running or whatever.
Yeah, well,
So
that was their goal.
yeah, right. Obviously not, but it's just like it's funny to think like that was their contribution to the main war effort is just to be really annoying, just because they didn't want to
Yeah,
run
that's
with
what
the French.
well, that comes up to the next thing I was saying. So basically, I base in the Peninsula. One, so it's a marketing thing. You want to
For
sell
sure.
books because if you don't sell any books, the game dies and you can't keep going. Um, the other thing too is basically you have the French, the English, the Spanish, Portuguese to a point are your combatants. So a lot of games is wow, that's kind of low on list. I'm big into list building. I like list building a lot because I find it very interesting to make weird combinations
Hmm.
that your buddies didn't think of, or you pull out a rabbit out of your hat and you're like, oh wow, that really works. So even though there's only 4 factions, you and I could both make British lists, and they can look completely different. You can make a
Hmm.
British list with only Germans in it. You can make a
Yep.
British list with only Scots or only Irish. There's the French. You can make a French list with just Swiss or
Poles.
Poles.
A lot of
Kind of cool
poles.
thing is you can make you could have an Irish British unit, an
Yep.
Irish French unit, and an Irish Spanish unit because the Irish were all over that because they were heavily because remember the Spanish and the British didn't like each other for a long time,
Hmm.
and so a lot of Irishmen went to Spain just so they could fight the British, and then they became allies. That's one of the reasons the Spanish army was sort of separated throughout the whole thing. They didn't really want to be under British control because they didn't like the British that much. They had the Spanish Armada and all that kind of crap, but they weren't super happy about the British.
Yeah, it's called
That
it's
was
called Blood and Plunder. Go play that, and you'll learn why they didn't like each
yeah,
other.
well, of course, yeah, yeah. But the French, obviously the French didn't start like in the British maybe World War One,
Yeah,
so
yeah. There was a
but
little some grunting for
but
sure.
but that was the idea, So like with the French, you can I have Northern Italians, Neapolitans, Poles, um, Irish,
Confederacy of the Rhine and
Swiss,
all that stuff.
and Confederation of the Rhine, Germans, and all. And the kind of cool thing, like the Germans have a special rule for the French because they were trained. A lot of them were trained by the Hessian. Like they had a different kind of training. Although as the war progressed, they became more folded in like regular French units.
Hmm.
But the Germans the British Germans, or the King's German Legion, got that similar training, so they both have the
Yeah.
same special rule, even though they're on different sides of the. different sides. So that was kind of the concept to keep it interesting. The other thing too is because the units are so small relatively to other Napoleonic units, if you want to paint that super weird unit that was barely used because you think the uniforms look awesome and you want guys with yellow coats and like yellow coats or green pants or whatever, like a
Hmm.
Spanish unit, you can do that because you can make the argument. Well, on this day, that there were 10 of those dudes that just happened to be around that the captain grabbed to go grab some supplies. Now you
Yep.
have them in your army, and so I like that. I like the modeling aspect of it. I like also if you want to make flag, have lots of flags, you can do that. If you want to have lots of drummers and musicians, you can do that. Would a 50-man detachment have a regimental color? Probably not.
No.
But this is
Could you
end of
imagine?
the day, it looks cool and it's a game. See, that's the
Yep.
simulation versus game.
Yep.
I don't like massive simulations because it gets very technical and boring. But I don't like things that are super gamey because that's like beer and pretzels. You're just drinking beer. You want something in the middle
Roughly in the middle. It's funny you say
and
that
lean
because
a
I think
little
I
more
was
game. A little
I
more
was
game.
doing I was doing this exact thing because I had Mike on for the very first episode of this segment of our show, and I was just talking about the exact same thing. I was like, I think that Blood and Plunder is literally smack dab in the middle
Right.
with a little bit of a lean to the game side, and
Right.
that's
Yeah.
why
Because
I think the game works as well as it does.
at the end of the day, it's a game, and we
Yeah.
discussed that amongst ourselves. That's probably where you saw the commonality between the two of us talking. We talk.
Mhm.
We think about that. We don't just pull it out of our butt. Just, there is some thought process into this where you don't just, like throw it up against the wall and hope it works. Like you got
Like
to
it's
say,
and ultimately it is a business, right? It's like I know that Firelock, it's like you're doing this to survive, to make a little profit or whatever. But it's like if you
right.
don't make something that people don't want to buy, then it's like you feel like, well, what am I doing here?
Yeah. There's a level of, is it a passion project? Of course. But it's
Oh, of course.
also, it's like what I said about using the peninsula. If I picked the invasion of Russia, right.
Hmm.
And, that hurt the sales of the book. Well, then I don't make an expansion.
Right.
So my idea is to make Blood Bayonets, the start of the Peninsula War,
Yep.
and then pick up another theater area. And I'm thinking the invasion of Russia. I'm about 95% because that adds every
Yep.
other faction known to man in the game.
Yep.
My son wants to go Napoleon's invasion of Egypt,
I was just
which
about to
is
say, are you going to do Egypt at some
which is
point? That'd be cool.
cool. But the problem with getting into those really niche areas is now you got to think of reality of how many people are going to buy that book.
Right.
But if you develop a fan base out of your first book, you can be successful with the second one. But if you just made a book that's just focusing on Napoleon's Egypt or a rule set, you're not
Nobody's
going
going to buy that.
to. Well, a lot of people, there's people don't even know about it. Like, they're like,
Yeah.
what? And so, you have to think critically about how are you producing. It's like with Blood and Plunder. Blood and Plunder, they have pirates, and pirates are a big part of the game. But in reality, the game is about the nations of Europe trying to dominate the Caribbean with
Yep.
some dumb pirates in the way. Think about
Yeah.
it. Think
That's a good way to
about
put
a
it.
U.S. destroyer and some Somalis.
Yep.
Who's winning that?
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
one off.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
it's like that. It's like you're in your pirate boat rolling around with your 40 dudes, and then an actual warship rolls up. You're like, I'm leaving. Like, let's get the hell out of here. We're going to lose.
Just shoot them with those cannons once and things just
But
explode.
but but from the marketing side of it, you can pull people into the game that know nothing about the game because they
Yep.
think pirates. I mean, look at our big box set, which is awesome. It's Maynard and Blackbeard. Blackbeard's on the front of that sucker. Did Sir Francis Drake, which you could argue he's a pirate, but he's really a privateer.
Sure.
He
Yeah.
probably had a
He might
lot
ruffle
more
some feathers
impact.
with that one.
Yeah, but he had a lot more impact on the Spanish Main and everything than probably Blackbeard did.
Oh,
But
yeah.
Blackbeard's famous because of the history of pirates. So you need that. Like in my book, every English dude and me included, Sharp's rifles.
Hmm.
Richard Sharp, who's fictional, but Bernard Cornwell's books. The 95th Rifles. I have a book. It's funny. I have a rule set called Napoleon. Right.
Hmm.
It's just called Napoleon. It's a book, and on the front is the 95th Rifle guy. There's no Frenchman
It's
on the front.
iconic. You
But
know
but
the look.
that's but that's what they. It's like you're doing D-Day, you want a Ranger or the 101st Airborne or something, it's like those things just go hand in hand. So I have some of the historical figures, like, Rifleman Harris and stuff are in there.
Yep.
So there is some historical 95th Rifles guys, but they're in the game. But you have to have, it's like, there's certain things you want to have in there to get, as you said, iconic. But that gets people excited about the game too, because they could
Sure does.
recreate a Sharps Rifles book too. If you wanted to do because I have a campaign system in there. If you wanted to do something like that, you could actually read a book and then do a kind of historical fiction version of the game. It'd be kind of cool. It'd be kind of fun way to do it. So.
Because I know Wargame Atlantic do in their kit. There's like you can make Sean Bean, right? You can make
Oh yeah,
Sean Bean's
yeah,
character. You can actually make like
And
Fort
who's the
Sharp.
one with the 7 shooter? I think that's Harris. You can make him.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's Harris. I don't. I admit it's been like forever since I've even done anything with Sharp's rifle, but
Yeah.
the ability for you to make your own stories and I think it speaks volumes of the fact that since this is such a smaller skirmish game, you can have like a guy who's just in charge of like maybe one company and with some
Right.
support elements, and it's just like I'm Joe, Jackass or whatever, and I'm gonna slowly learn what the hell I'm doing as we do this, and you just happen to go. It's like the Battle of what Gringo or whatever it is, Grigio, where it was like the
Yeah.
two super ad hoc units that kind of like bumped into each other and they just started killing
Hmm.
each other with the dogs and all that.
Yeah. That's. I mean, in the campaign thing, there it is like that. Your kind of no name commander can be developed, so you have sort of an RPG element a little bit
Yeah.
to it.
Woohoo.
And like the future, the long term futures of the games is I like. Have you ever played Port Royal? You're familiar with the Port Royal
Oh yeah,
game?
love it. Absolutely love it.
I think one of the ways we're going to go is with Blood and Valor. We're going to do Blood and Valor night raids.
Sweet.
That's our working title, and I think that
Okay.
really parlays into that a 5-man team going into a trench, 6-man, that kind of parlays. But you can even do that with a Napoleonic game. Like you could do that. Like where they're all individual dudes and kind of
Yep.
go that route. And the beauty of it is if you have a Blood and Plunder, if you have a Blood and Plunder army, you can play Port Royal. You already have the figures,
Yep.
and all of those would work like that. I think it's kind of cool.
And I
That's
think that's some of the genius of doing rule sets like you guys are doing, where it's if you have a rule set that's model agnostic, I say somewhat loosely, you have like the Perry brothers and stuff to pull on, and they may not even realize you exist, but they make these models, and then you can just use them. You're literally just making books. Like the overhead for making a book is significantly less than creating a
well,
model line, and then you have to have a successful model line, and if that model line doesn't succeed, then you wasted all this money and
right,
you don't make any
right.
expansions.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah, absolutely. The profit margins on books and stuff like that are much better, and
yeah, for
also
sure.
for the ancillary stuff like cards and the cardboard punch outs and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, look at like the Osprey blue books, the little blue books
Yep.
Osprey makes. They basically
Yep.
crank those suckers out and they make profit on them. And if some of them stick, then they do a reprint and they make more money. And if not, they die. So I mean, it's a business model where you can you just throw out a lot of stuff, and every once in a while you get a hit. It's great, but they're just making books. They're not making anything else. So fortunately with going back to that, fortunately with Napoleonics, it's the models exist. There's huge ranges. There's also I 3D print a lot of my stuff. Like, have you ever heard of Piano War Games?
Yep. Piano's
They
great.
make beautiful, beautiful models. They're all one piece. They're awesome.
Yep.
So once you buy like $12, you get like a French infantry. You could just make a bazillion of them and just keep
Yep.
going and just paint all kinds of weird stuff. So they all exist out there, which I think is really cool. I wish, I just like the whole the future. I wish guys would make more like some of the weirder stuff.
Yeah, I agree. You
Like,
get repeating stuff. The British stuff,
yeah, well,
especially. There's just like
everybody makes.
so much of it.
Well, that's like when we made for the Kickstarter, we made a British commander and a French commander. And I understand why Mike wanted to do that. And I understand if it was me, I would have made a Neapolitan commander and a
Sure.
Spanish commander or something weird because I think it's cool. Like the Perrys have fluttered around with French Revolution. That'd be really neat. Or the more stuff in the what is it in the invasion of Egypt? Kai, my son saw guys riding camels, Frenchmen riding camels, and that's pretty cool.
He must have loved writing Lawrence of Arabia stuff for
Oh
a
yeah,
while.
he just watches. He's taking film classes in school now, so he's super interested in all that stuff. But
And
the
just for the record, anybody who's listening to this, if Napoleon didn't go to Egypt, we might not have the Rosetta Stone. So you guys might want to
well, yeah,
appreciate that
if
part.
he didn't feel like he was all enlightened, and brought some, he actually brought like academics with him. If he had just been purely military, he would have left all those guys at home, and we would have never found it. So good luck figuring out hieroglyphs without that thing. But
I mean, he definitely did not abandon all of his French troops at in Egypt as
no,
he ran
no,
back to France or anything. Definitely didn't do that.
no, he was. Well, I mean, he was a what do you call it? He was a Machiavellian guy. He was there. He was going to take over. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, for sure.
you can't say
Um,
he didn't have ambition. That's for sure. So
that's true. He became the emperor of France at like the ripe age of like he was like 32 or something, wasn't he?
yeah, 1804. He crowned himself too. He took that crown away from the bishop and just put it on his own head and said,
Yep,
"I'm the
because he
emperor."
said
You
that
know
he didn't
what?
want the church to be the one to put it on his head
You know why he's an emperor and not a king?
because it sounds cooler.
No, the French don't like kings. They just cut the king's
That's
head off.
that's true. I
Yeah,
can see that.
so he had to come up with a different name. So, like, kings are bad, emperor's good. Emperor's good. That's part of the reason. Like, they literally, he fought in the revolution against the monarchy. Like against the monarchy, and then how do you become a monarch? So,
Because he was
it's
because
all
technically he was the consul, if I remember right, for at
first.
least
Yeah,
for a long time.
he was part of the directorate, which is the like a governing body. Then he became
Yeah.
first council, then first council for life, and then he's like, all right, I'm just the emperor. Screw all that. No, you know.
So
Another interesting thing is he codified a lot of laws,
right, the Napoleonic Code is actually really fascinating.
and Louisiana still uses it. You know that, right? So it's like when you become a lawyer, if you want to be a Louisiana lawyer, you have to kind of break off and focus it on their laws. It's different than the rest of the country to some
And
extent.
it's similar to that chunk of I always forget exactly which province of Canada is. I think it's Vancouver, like French Canada.
Oh,
It's like
Quebec,
it's not necessarily to that level, but they do things so much differently than everywhere
right?
else, and I think there's a lot of that kind of floating
He
around.
also the metric system came from Napoleon too.
Sure did.
Well, not him personally, but under his tutelage or control or whatever.
And I will say, watch Oversimplified. He's got a thing on Napoleonic when it all came up. It's a really, really great way to just get like a surface level with some depth look at it. I think it's absolutely great. And even VTG's overview of it, I love VTG. He makes a lot of this history stuff very accessible to people who
Right.
don't
Yeah.
necessarily enjoy it. And Oversimplified makes it funny. So if you're even remotely curious about this kind of stuff, I would say go listen to that and yeah, give it a watch and
Yeah.
tell him I
I
sent
was
you again.
all jazzed up about the Napoleon movie, but it was such garbage. It just made me.
Yeah, I heard it wasn't great. Yeah,
Oh, dude,
well, you know.
don't even watch it if you haven't watched it. It's a waste of your time. It was horrible.
Okay, that's good to
It
know.
made me bad
So
the whole time.
let's do this. Let's do some quick fire. What are the things that make this game different than Blood and Plunder, just so people have some idea of what they're getting into? Obviously, the rule book roughly going to be about a month, probably from when this comes out, give or take. So you'll be
Yeah.
able to read all this on
Yeah.
your own. But I'll do some quick fire. I'll list them off, and then you give as much description as you want in them. So obviously, this game is going to have formations because you can't have Napoleonic warfare without people standing in lines with colorful outfits, just blasting at each other before they run at each other and stab each other. Obviously, there's going to be more of a focus on cannons because of the fact that Napoleon was an artillery commander, and he absolutely loved. I mean, there's probably not going to be like a huge focus, but there's going to be more focus on cannons, I think, than in Blood and Plunder for sure. Most
Yeah.
of the
The
pirate.
cannons are better. They're better.
Yeah, I would say I would say so. A little
They
bit
work.
bigger than like a 4-pound cannon, you know. So there'll be probably more focus on just being having access to artillery. I think is probably the
Right.
way to
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah.
Cavalry would be a lot different in this one. I know that there's the concept of something called an impact hit, which is similar
Mhm.
to, I guess, like a Warhammer Fantasy. You ram your horse into somebody, and there's you got more weight than they do. So it's the idea
Yeah.
of
The
moment
Games
drive.
Workshop guys stole it from me, so I
Oh,
can't.
that's true. Okay, there you go. That works.
Yeah.
Um, and okay, so yeah, formations, cavalry, artillery, and the command system. The way that the commander in this game, he's got like a little retinue. He's got aide de camps and stuff like that, and it will actually it's much different than the way Blood and Plunder does it, because if you're actually standing near your commander, you seem to get a bonus, at least for your
Right, right.
morale,
If you're within his
which is
command range, his bubble.
because if you don't have the force of will of your commander to keep everybody's ass standing where they're supposed to, people are gonna just start running for the hills, over the hills in the other direction. So
That
yeah, go ahead
also,
and run through those and what you think might be some good highlights for people to look forward to.
yeah, the kind of cool thing is with the formations, what's kind of interesting about the game, obviously formations is a big deal. You have the line formation, which is really important. And then you have, the French have the attack column, which is like a battering ram for cramming in like a melee, like a battery ram. So obviously, if you're a British player and you see the French lining up an attack formation or attack column, you should probably try to stop that. In all my demo games, everybody ignores it, and I'm like, "Hey, this is really bad." And then they get into close combat and they blow up your line, but that's on you as a player.
Yep.
We have square, which kind of acts like a. You can always form square, but
Deterrent, I guess.
well, if you form, you can always do it on your own. But if you do it as a reaction to something, like I get within 8 inches of you with cavalry, you can opt to form square. You could fail to form square, or you're successful. You gain a fatigue to do it, but it makes you almost impervious to cavalry. But it makes you more vulnerable to shooting with cannons, and you can't move, so you have to waste time to get out of it. I've had guys move up and form square on an objective to hold the objective. Gives you a 360 arc. There's benefits, negative, positive to it. Some people have asked me about march columns. I don't have them because this game's played on a small table, so you should already be engaged. You're not like doing all this massive maneuvering.
Yeah.
One thing with now we do have skirmish formations, which work. It can work as a shield for your if you're shooting through a skirmish formation at a target behind it. You can bleed those hits off to your skirmishers. And what that does is the skirmishers have better saves against shooting than the line, right? The negative of skirmish formation is they're more vulnerable to cavalry. They're considered loose or skirmish. They have a lot of benefits. Like they run, they can be harder to hit. Which kind of cool. One of my buddies does. This is what he likes to do. He takes his 95th rifles, which have rifles, so they have much better range bands. They get more reloads, but they're veterans. He starts the game with them in line, right? Which, in order to be in any formation in this game, like line or anything except for loose, you have to have at least 8 models. He's got his 8 models lined up, right? He blasts away, so he does a volley fire, so he gains the benefit of more dice with his rifles.
With a longer range rifle.
In the next action, he breaks them out into skirmish formation and spreads them out in front of his lines. So that way he gets the benefit of both sides. He thinks he's super, like he's like a tactical genius when he does it, but it actually works. But the only negative is those troops are expensive, so that's going to be a high cost unit if you want to do it. But there's other ways to use them. Skirmishers, you can put them in line for certain ones, and they'll have that keyword line. But while you're in line, your save becomes worse because you're standing in the big blob of dudes. You're not spread out hiding.
And I imagine that because of the breadth of stuff that you have, that it doesn't always have to be Voltaire or 95th rifles. You probably have like just light divisions and Ligny.
Oh yeah. You could do for the British. You can have the 95th rifles or the 60th American. They're not Americans. Right. They were supposed to go to America.
Right.
The 60th American were actually more involved than the 95th. They were bigger than that. There were more units, but they were always kind of penny packets of guys. They were really small that would get attached. But you could do just regular flankers, which are just regular, like Voltaires, which mean, you know what that means in English?
Jumpers. Volters? It means like jumping over something.
Or jumpers, like light guys.
Yeah.
They call them flank companies in the British force, and you could just spread them out. But they have muskets, so they're a little less effective for shooting, but they're cheaper in points. The French had hordes of those dudes, But then some of the Germans had Jaegers, which had rifles. There were a couple other rifle units floating around. But yeah, you could play around with whatever combo you want. The other thing is the Spanish guerrillas actually can function like skirmishers too. The kind of cool thing about the Spanish guerrilla armies is they function more like a blood and plunder army. They're bunches of dudes, right? And they have lots of cavalry, though. So they have lots of lancers, but they function more like that kind of blobs of guys with 360 arcs. But then the flip side is they're much more vulnerable to, a heavy cavalry force. But you can make combinations. Like you could take a British force and attach some Spanish skirmishers, and they have some cool rules. Or you can do 95th Rifles, or you can do flanker. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. The other thing with the cavalry are always considered in formation because formations do have an arc, and it's a 180. It's really big. So I don't want like arguments like, hey, it's 20. I played one game where the cannons had a 22-degree arc. We had to get
No.
It was stupid. We're like, what are we doing?
No.
And then you start arguing over, like what's your point of origin, and it's just dumb. So it's a 180 arc. So it's a wide arc. But the reason I do that for cavalry is one, I want them to be in formation because they're big horses, and formations block line of sight. Loose and skirmish do not. So you can't shoot through cavalry basically, and you can't shoot through dudes in a block. But guys running around in the open, you can shoot through them and see through them and march through them and all that kind of crap. The other thing, it came up in playtesting where cavalry got charged from the rear. Can they defensive fire? Do they have 360 arcs? It just seemed weird. Like, what are they going to charge backwards? It didn't make any sense. Right. So I just, but they have
horses are not good at running backwards. I'll just say that.
Formations do have flanks, and the way I do it is very simple. You draw a line along that front rank, and anything that hits behind it, rear or side, gets extra impact hits. That's where the impact hits come in for cavalry. And that's a big difference between blood and plunder. The impact hits work. Heavy cavalry get 4. And when I say impact hits, you just roll extra dice.
Yep.
I tried to cut down on re-rolls. I just added more dice.
That works.
Because it's a cleaner way to do it than re-rolling, because you can make mistakes and get confused. And then we have we call it glory, but it's like fortune. It's a re-roll system. So I don't want to have guys, can I re-roll that? You can never re-roll a re-roll. So I wanted to cut down on that as much as possible. There are some re-rolling stuff, but it's most you're re-rolling one die, not big groups of die, unless it's certain scenarios. You can re-roll them all. So those are the different formations, but then conversely, there's naval forces in the game, right? Yep. So, but this is you as a player. If you want to take your naval captain and put your sailors on the land with a bunch of Marines, they're not going to be as effective as a land force. Vice versa, a land force fighting on a ship won't be as effective as a naval force, right?
Yep. Makes sense.
The naval captains work, how you're saying like the little retinue? Yep. They work like blood and plunder. You attach them to a unit. It's one dude. So he attaches to a unit. He functions within that unit. When he's on the ship, he has command range of the whole ship. When he's on land, he has a 6-inch command range.
Okay, so he does lose his screaming.
Yeah, because he's better. He's much better on a ship than he is on land.
Yep. Makes sense.
But I guarantee you, when we start doing tournaments, some brainiac's going to show up with Captain Jack Albury running around with this tiny little bubble command range. But that's on you as a player. If you want to do that, go ahead. But you can make combinations where you can add Marines into forces and add guerrillas, and there's all kinds of. I made it very interchangeable. Like you could take a British force and have Portuguese with them and Spanish with them, and or you can have it just pure British or pure Spanish or pure whatever you want to do. There's all kinds of different combinations. I even have Joseph Bonaparte's Spanish army in it too.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
we saw it.
I thought that was cool.
The Spanish, they're not good. They're not. I don't know how they're all bad.
How could you say that?
It's kind of cool. Like it's an interesting way to play, though. It's a quantity. It has quantity has a quality all of its own. Where if you're playing British, you're going to have probably 2 line regiments. Most games run about 5 to 6 units. Because the meta's been hitting 250-point games. That's where you could get the toys. You're not so stripped down that you feel like you're limited too much. And you could get all the cool little unit, like a cool special unit and have enough points to pull it off. And it leaves you with like 5 to 6 units around there. If you're playing an all Spanish force, which I played successfully, where you're playing all inexperienced, you're probably going to be running closer to 4 line units instead of 2. Now you're bumping 2 more units in there, but they don't activate as well. They're harder to reload, but if they still shooting, you're still shooting a lot of shots and stuff starts to die. So you can win with them. They're more challenging, but you could do it. And I think their uniforms are super sexy. So I love the Spanish.
Yeah, who doesn't love a good yellow?
Oh my god, yeah, those are the cavalry are ridiculous. Like the ones I have cavalry like literally yellow pants. They're wearing yellow pants to war. I just painted some of the Perry's new Spanish, but they're all white uniforms with different,
Yep.
And the Irish wear light blue jackets with yellow facings. I mean, come on, it's
It's like an
ridiculous.
eyesore in any other game.
But it
You
looks
imagine blue,
super cool. I don't know
blue and
about
yellow.
so,
And I think when it comes to the paint jobs, especially for the British, I think when you're thinking of like how you're going to plan it out, because obviously they have facings where they'll change the
right,
colors of like the collars and the
right, yeah.
cuffs. So I think, and this goes back to the scale thing, is it seems to me like if you were going to play this, you say, oh hey, I'm playing one specific. I always forget the measurements of like unit size. Regiment, I think is the word, where it's like it's like the center company
No,
and then the two flanks.
no, you're looking at battalions basically. The
I'm thinking of battalion.
battalions
Okay, you're on
broken,
battalion.
broken up. A French battalion is 4 center companies, which are
Okay,
4 Fusiliers, and then
right,
you have a grenadier company and a light company. The British were very similar, that was,
yep,
and then 2 to 3 battalions made a regiment, and sometimes
right,
one battalion would be back in England as a recruiting battalion to get new dudes to send them, to theater, and that's the normal breakdown. If it was perfect, they'd have close to 1,000 dudes, but usually they never come. Guys would die. Guys, they would, they desert, whatever. So, but that was usually the way it was broken down. So your concept of this is maybe a company with some
yep,
support, and so so you have a company of dudes, or is your line unit, and then support would be some like I was saying, it's like you've collected up a group of guys. This wouldn't even make a line in the daily report. That's how small
right,
these battles.
right.
Now, if this was American Revolutionary War, it would be a battle.
Correct,
Like they
correct.
would have battles of 5, 6, 500, 1,000 guys. Really small combination.
But
But
that's
yeah,
got to be
that's
blood and plunder, Rufus. That's blood and plunder.
well, yeah, yeah. It's. But you can play Blood and Plunder big too. We've played really big games with like 500, 600 miniatures on the table. You could do it.
Listen, let me just say, when it comes to what's coming for Blood and Plunder, I am practically dripping with anticipation when it comes to American War of Independence. I am so excited to play a
I
continental
want
bunch
to.
of hillbillies.
We get in a big fight. I want to write it. I could use the Blood and Bayonets rules and actually more simplified because they don't have
Sure.
the cavalry. They don't have the artillery. They do have cavalry, but not like Napoleonic
Yeah,
period.
definitely not like Napoleonic for sure.
They didn't. They weren't forming squares. They were more like 7 Years' Wars guys. They're lining up and just blasting the crap out of each other. But Mike, he gets very protective of America.
I don't blame.
So,
Now, let's put this into perspective. I live in Woburn and I work in Lexington.
right,
They
right,
have
yeah, yeah,
a bit of a attachment to the American War of Independence.
absolutely.
Them in
No, and
Concord.
I've been to the incredible cow pens in South Carolina, which is basically a field, but like a
Hmm.
small field. It's tiny. It leans more towards AWI because of the
Yeah,
scale. AWI is small. I mean, a lot of those
sure is.
battles would be literally a line in the dispatches in the Napoleonic Wars. I mean, they were enormous. The Napoleonic battlefields were freaking enormous. I mean, you're talking
Yep.
hundreds of thousands of men. But that's but that being said, Mike is not. He's we talk about we steal each other's ideas all the
Sure.
time. You'll see some of the rules start to percolate into the AW. A lot of the volley fire type stuff, and that'll exist. There's a commonality in all the, we all work together. It's not like we have our own little fiefdoms and you can't take my ideas. One commonality you'll notice amongst all the Blood and Plunder games and Blood and games is the fatigue system.
Yep. On
Works
the
the same
actions.
across all of them. And people ask me like, "Hey, how are they different?" And you were asking before. I always think of them as like cousins.
Yeah.
If you know how to play one, you can pick up the other one and nothing flat. But you don't want to make a clone. That's the trick. You don't want to feel like, "Hey, I'm playing Blood and Plunder with different dudes, and it's the
Yep.
same thing." And it's tricky to do that. But that's where you have to separate like how the units work, how the armies work, how they function, like and different things. Like with this one, I use the card system. Unlike Blood and Valor, I use a totally different system.
Yep.
And but I feel like the cards work more in this one because there's a much more disparity of training versus Blood and Valor, which most of these guys are trained on a very similar level. Blood and Steel uses a different system because they're more in the modern. They're more leaning towards the modern versus the time periods of Blood and Plunder, Blood and Bayonets. Originally, Blood and Crowns. Eric, who's the writer, Eric wanted to use the Blood and Valor system, and then he realized he probably shouldn't, and then he like apologized to me, and I'm like, dude, it's like I don't care, it's no big deal. Like it doesn't bother me, because that's one of the positive things we have. We play each other, we play the different games. We're all about making it as accessible and fun as possible, not trying to compete. Like, we screw around with each other, say,
Sure.
my game's better than your game, that kind of stuff. But that's just being silly, like silly inter-office stuff.
It's the
No,
like we were saying before. It's the making fun of each other thing. It's like it's
of
probably the
course.
most important part of this
Well,
whole thing.
you saw my playthrough video with Tom Keegan. I
Yep.
just acting like a maniac. I do that all the time when I play games.
Keegers, I think, deserves it in a lot of ways, though. I think he's got his
Well,
head gets too big if he doesn't get taken down a notch.
one thing you'll notice in the playtesters, I gave them all nicknames in the book. Some of them are pretty amusing. So when you get the book, like look at the playtest. You can probably maybe see it in the like John Petrelli. I named him John Chardonnay Petrelli because he's always drinking Chardonnay. Because John is like extra white. He's like one of the whitest guys I know, dude. He's like
Petrelli's a great guy, by the way.
no,
If he
he's a
does listen to this,
super
I
great
doubt he
guy.
will.
But John
We
is
love Petrelli.
very straight arrow. Like he doesn't divert.
Yeah, he's got a very strong moral compass.
Yes, but he
I
puts
do
up with us.
remember that.
He puts up with all of us, so he's obviously got a sense of humor. So,
So
but
as a quick aside, it's funny because as someone who grew up in the Orlando area of Florida, I knew some of the people that are kind of like involved with the Firelock stuff now almost completely by accident because I just worked at a store and they just
right,
happened to go to that store. And it was funny watching your videos and bumping into them at Adepticon. And I saw the people that you were playing against in the video. I was like, wait a minute, I know exactly who that is.
yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah, I developed those guys because I'm from Miami, and when I retired, I moved up to Orlando. So I would go up to Huracan and Recon, which are two
yeah,
HFGS cons, and then I go to Crucible, which is like a big, more tournament type con.
yep,
And that's where I started meeting like John and Tom and all this because I developed a group of friends. So when I moved up here, I moved up here the next weekend. I was at Keegan's house playing games
yeah, that sounds like
because
Keegers to me.
you need somebody else. It's a social. These games are social events. You can't just you can't play by yourself. But at the end of the day, it makes the games better when you play with other people.
You crave that human element.
Of course,
Crave.
yeah, of course, and hanging out and having a good time. That's a big part of it. So and it gives you something to look forward to. And then it's funny when I was working, I had a guy. I'm a retired police officer from Miami. That's what I did, and I was sitting. This is a funny story. So I'm sitting at my desk, and I was a sergeant at the time. So I'm sitting there in the sergeant's office, and I had a white dwarf on my desk, right? So this who became a good I knew him, but he wasn't like my friend. I knew him a work person, but not like his name's Cesar Villafana. He comes rolling in. He's like, "Hey, do you know what that is?" I go, "Yeah, of course I know what it is. I bought it." He's like, "You know what?" And then he maneuvered. He came onto my crew to work, and dude, we would just talk like nerd crap. Like around the end of the night, we'd meet up and we just talk, and nobody knew what the hell we were talking about.
You're doing
Talking
secret
about
language.
different, list, like what's the AP on this weapon,
Yep.
all like 40K crap. And but it allows you to have this whole frame of reference and stuff to talk about people. And it's this weird world. Like when you explain to people what it is, like they say, oh, I'm going to Adepticon or I'm going to Gen Con. They're like, what's that? And you try to explain it.
It's tough.
People, I mean, it would be easier if you just had a porno. Like I'm looking at Playboy. People understand it easier. You know what I'm saying? Then
I get it.
why you got looking at toy soldiers? I go play with little toy soldiers with adult men, and we fly to another part of the country. Why would you do that? But it's a whole world. But I see guys walk into like these cons, and their two reactions are usually like what the hell is that? Or whoa.
Right.
And you get the guys who go, whoa, what is this? You got them. They're in it. They like it. Then the other guys are like, dude, that's weird. And they just walk out. So it's a cool hobby. It's a harmless hobby. It really is.
I was gonna say if something that that people frequently say is you can't get on drugs when you're addicted to the plastic crack. So it's like if you got
Oh,
a
yeah,
hobby to
good
do,
point. Yeah. Or the
I can
other
think of
one
way
is
worse.
we used to get dudes like would come over and their girlfriend would roll in to see what he was up to, and they'd take a look at us and they'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, you're good. You can stay here. This
Yeah,
repels.
forever.
You
You could just
know,
live here if you want.
yeah, you're not gonna be in here picking up girls playing
Yeah, for
Napoleon.
sure.
It's not a thing." And
Although I will say, I've gone to some nerd cons these days, and there's
no, it's
there's
more.
women. They're
No,
starting
it's
to pop up.
it's definitely changed. No,
Yeah,
it's
huh?
there are more women involved, and I think that's maybe a parlay of video games. Like a lot more
Yes.
women play
And
like Call
dress
of
up. There's like
Duty
the
and
dress up element, like the
yeah,
cosplay element.
yeah, the
I think there's a
cosplay.
lot
Yeah,
to
of
it.
course, yeah, cosplay. But it pulls people in and gets them interested.
Mm.
But historical, like there's a lady in our groups that we play in that she lives in Sarasota. She plays historical war games. Like that's
It's
her thing.
crazy. Do you
But,
imagine? Could you imagine that
but
when you were a
she
kid?
her degree is in ancient, Bronze Age history.
Yeah.
So that's her interest. So obviously that parlays over to historic, like the Punic War and all. That's like her focus. She likes all that stuff. But she's like a unicorn. That's not that common. You know,
It's very
especially
rare.
because I first met her with playing Blood and Plunder. Like she would show up to play, and at first, and I'm not trying to be
Yeah.
misogynistic, but normally
Yeah.
you're like, why are you playing this? Is your
Right.
like boyfriend playing with you, or are you really into this? And no, she was like super into it. Like she was at Adepticon, she was off playing Lord of the Rings, while her husband Jake's up there playing, drinking and playing BattleTech with us. And I'm like, her name's Holly, and I go, where's Holly? Oh, she's in the Lord of the Rings tournament. But it's cool.
Crazy.
I
That's
love it.
amazing.
It's super
I
cool.
love it.
And it would be great if there was more of that, but it's a tough nut to crack.
Yeah.
And it can be intimidating. You get a bunch of 50-year-old dudes. I call them the cargo short mafia. All sitting around with cargo shorts
Oh
on.
no, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" Like, and they're all, like, or the cargo kilt. God,
Yep.
I don't know if
Oh
you
my
know
God, it's so amazing. Me and Kara talk about. Okay, we're gonna lose track of the thing if we
You
keep
still
talking.
there? I
Yes,
lose you.
100%. If you go to a
Oh, I might
Adepticon,
have lost
I
it.
used to play a game where you just count the number of cargo shorts you see. It's a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
fun game. It's
Well,
crazy.
I don't know if you heard me say it, the cargo kilt. Have you seen
Yep.
that?
There's lots of kilts, a lot of kilts and stuff.
Dude,
Yeah,
you're
it's
wearing a
all over the
skirt
place.
with pockets. What are you doing, bro?
Mm. Skirt with
Wear,
pockets.
hey, just wear a
Kara,
skirt.
I guarantee you, Kara's gonna be listening. Kara's gonna be editing this and downstairs, and I'm gonna hear her laughing.
Dude, I keep
She's gonna
dropping.
start going maniacal, like laughter at some point. So that's exciting. I get to look forward to that. All right, so we got a little bit of a freeze.
Yeah, it froze for a second. I don't know. It's probably me. It's got to be on my end. I don't know. I don't know, dude. I keep pausing it. Can you see me? You back? No? Did I lose you? I can hear you. No?
Okay, so obviously the Napoleonic Wars, there's a lot of them. There were 7 coalitions, I think, total, and there's a lot of different places in Europe that they used to blast each other. Obviously, we talked about the invasion of Russia. That's going to be one I can only imagine. But if you had like a long-term
Dude, I'm losing
strategy,
you
right?
again.
Let's like talk the 5-year plan. Do you have any specific areas of the wars and different like areas that you just want to make books for that you think are probably going to come at some point in the future?
Yeah, obviously, I'd love to do Russia just because it adds all the other factions. That's the concept of it. I'd like to do, the 1805 campaign into Austerlitz, the 1809, Wagram and all that kind of stuff. Um, I love the Austrians. I think they're super cool. I've always liked them. That's like one of my, my favorites. So I'd like to get them involved.
Talk
Um,
about uniforms.
yeah, but it's going to be kind of like Blood and Valor. Blood and Valor, the first book, and No Peace Beyond the Line and stuff. The first book, Blood and Bayonets, is going to have all your rules and a bunch of starter armies. and then I'm going to blow it up and expand it. And when I get into
Sure.
Russia, I want to get some Ottomans in there too, because the Russians fought
Yeah.
them. So I want to have, like in Blood and Valor, I have over 70 lists in the second book. I mean, but they all crossplay. Everything can crossplay, and I want even
Yep.
if you want to play a Russian force against a British Peninsula force, you can 100% do it because it's going to be pointed out. You can play it. I don't want to limit like, oh well, yeah, oh you own them, I can't play you, Bob. We can't play. That would be the ultimate, like to go. But like you said, there's a lot of it from a lot of stuff to go, and it depends on how popular it is. Then down the road, so we get the Russian invasion, all that kind of stuff. What I would really like to do is do the French, Revolution, and then Napoleon in Egypt, Revolution in Egypt. But then
Yeah.
there's some issues with models. They're harder to find. It's a lot of metal. It makes it more expensive, more challenging to do it. But to try to encompass the whole thing, I could see it probably in 3 books, 3 separate books, and then in each one you add some more elements into it, like I want to add sieges, like the Forlorn Hopes and that kind of stuff. So obviously more scenarios and things like that. The only issue with like Russia and stuff is you lose a lot of the naval elements. There
Yeah.
was naval stuff, but it wasn't on the scale of the peninsula. The peninsula was a lot more heavily, even the Mediterranean in general. There's a lot more naval stuff going on. With a Russian, there was some, but it wasn't on the same scale. So you lose a
Yeah.
little.
Obviously.
It's kind of taking that away, which it'll be interesting to see how much the naval element takes off in the book versus the land element. I'm more of a land guy. I like the Navy stuff, but then there's other guys that that's what they're all about is the naval. When they heard that, they got like super jazzed, like a nerd vortex going, like all frothy and excited, which is cool. So that's why we put it in there. It's like you know what a nerd vortex is. I call them when they all start getting in a circle and start talking and get excited. Frothy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then with Blood and Valor, our original book, doing the like a small skirmish, like a really small, like Port Royal scale type thing, and then maybe even doing that into Napoleonics, like a small
Yeah.
scale. What I would really like to do is I'd like to write an AWI book. So I gotta beat on Mike to get him to do that. So hopefully we can get that done. Did I lose you again? I think we're.
Yeah. The last thing I heard you say was I would like to write an AWI book.
Yeah, and try to get try to break Mike. I'm going to just go down there. I'm going to burn his house down and beat him in the head with a hammer.
Oh no, I'm an accomplice. No.
No. Well, we just use diesel. You don't want to use gas because that's explosive. You got to go slow.
Oh, okay.
Slow burn.
You'll have plenty of time to get out.
But I know Mike's in the process of revamping, Blood and Plunder and doing, like the whole new line of miniatures and he wants to go back, which I find really interesting, is the Aztecs and the conquistadors. Like that. Oh my God,
that's cool. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, so Sir Francis Drake is going to be playable. Ooh.
Yeah. Well, that's the way we should, and we discuss this all the time. That's like the dream, have Pizarro and all the crap and Ponce de Leon and all those guys, and then all the different Mesoamerican nations. It'd be super neat. The other one is, obviously the Barbary pirates and, the shores of Tripoli and the 1802, the English, the American Navy running around over there would be really cool.
Because of the War of 1812, you could conceivably include America in.
Yes, but that comes back to Mike. Mike's always, we argue. Yeah, I should. I would love to do 1812. It would be easy. I already got the British written. It's the same guys. You just add the Canadians in there. And then a bunch of bumbling Americans bumbling around,
gosh. We sure don't talk about the War of 1812 very much. And it's not great.
The Canadians, that's like their birth of a nation. Like when they became like to them, the War of 1812 is a really big deal, which we lost. People forget that. We invaded Canada twice and lost both times. So
we sure did.
Yeah, we did. In the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. But, it's like, but most Americans, what? They don't even, the Battle of New Orleans, we won. I was like, that's 2
we're
weeks
the best. Yeah, for sure.
And they did win, Andrew Jackson did win, but it was not had any outcome of the treaty again. Zero.
No.
Like they had already signed that. But I would like to do that because But then that goes into there's plenty of British models, the American models, and it's harder to find them. A lot of people
Yeah.
don't make them. They do exist though, but that would be super cool, obviously. But that's why going back to what I was telling you, it's less niche than say like Napoleon's invasion of Egypt or something like that. But it is more niche because it's not AWI. AWI
Right.
people know that. That's a Peninsula War. Yes, they know that. Waterloo. That's the one that bores the hell out of me. Waterloo to me is D-Day invasion again. Like the
Yep.
D-Day. Every World War II game does D-Day. I find Waterloo interesting to an extent, but every game does Waterloo to a nauseum, dude. It's just how many more times we're going to fight this battle? It's
And
just,
I do think that it's important to realize the implications of the actual Battle of
well, of
Waterloo.
course, yeah,
Obviously,
absolutely,
it's
no,
huge.
no, yeah, it's huge, but it's like D-Day. It's like
Right.
I
Everybody's
don't,
doing
I
it.
don't want to recreate D-Day again. There's so many other interesting battles. Let's do something different.
Which is why I think ultimately I think the Peninsula War was a good direction to go, because I think it opens up the eyes of maybe your like armchair general to be like, oh yeah, I guess the Spanish ulcer was something that affected the
Yeah.
Napoleonic
Oh no,
Empire a
one
little
hundred
bit.
percent. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It tied down hundreds of thousands of troops. It was
Sure did.
Napoleon said it was a mistake to go in there. It's a
Yep.
mistake because Fernando VII, who was the king that they deposed, basically was just a horrible. Like the Spanish didn't like him, but it's like Afghanistan. They all fight amongst each other until someone invades, and they all fight about. It's like, oh, we got to
Right.
fight that guy.
Common enemy.
Yeah, the Spanish. I'm shit. What is it? Catalonia. In Barcelona was talking about seceding from Spain. What, like 5-6 years ago, and they were
Hmm.
arresting people for sedition. So Spain is not this monolith. There's divisions in that country that we don't usually understand because we're not there. But Spain, if they had handled that very differently, they could have been. They were an ally of the French. They could have maintained the ally, but obviously hindsight's 2020. When you're kicking everybody's butt, you think, oh, just go down. And when Napoleon was in Spain, he was kicking the crap out of
He sure
everybody.
was. Yes, he was.
The British still talk about that. Like, man,
And of course, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
they
yeah. Because when they
almost got
were getting
under
they were like
Moore.
sprinting to that. The guy got like nailed by a can Moore. I think it was
Yeah, Moore.
General
Yeah,
Moore.
but
Yeah,
he almost basically got run off the continent. Yeah, I
he
mean,
sure did. And then
the
he
only
died
reason
like
he
right
did
before they
it,
got off. Got hit by a
the only
cannonball
reason
or
he did
something.
it is the British paid the Austrians a whole shit ton of money to start fighting again, and then Napoleon's like, all right, I go finish those
I
guys.
gotta go.
And told his dudes like finish this off. You got it, and they didn't. And then it kept, Then the Duke of Wellington showed up, and it started
Yep.
expanding back out.
Yep.
But it's always finish the job before you leave. I guess I don't know, but the
And I
Austrians.
guess I mean, because you would think that most of the French marshals would know what was going on, but there was just obviously there's something about Napoleon himself that just like, because he said Wellington said he was the equivalent of 40,000 men just by
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, like a
existing.
whole corps. Yeah, well, it's. I guess you could say it's like General Lee, Robert E. Lee, and
Yeah,
the Confederate. The troops held him in such high regard, and when he was on the battlefield, they can't lose.
yeah.
So in their
And
minds, so,
that's what made
and
Gettysburg such like a wild like thing, is the fact that
yeah,
since he
yeah, yeah.
lost, Pickett's charge.
Well, he
Actually,
was
which isn't
fighting.
fair. It wasn't just Pickett; it was a bunch of other people. I
It's
think
all
Pickett.
Jeb Stuart off riding around, screwing off in the bushes. So nobody know where he went.
Yeah,
That's a whole.
that's a whole,
Have
yeah,
you
that's a
ever
whole other episode.
read the book Killer Angels by Michael Cera?
I have not.
Oh, that's an amazing book. You should read that. It's they based the movie on at Gettysburg, not this God's Generals. That thing was horrible, dude.
Sure.
It was like a love fest to Confederate generals. I don't know what that was, but the first book is amazing. It's an amazing book. It's really really well written. My sons are reading it right now, so we've been discussing it. And it's not. It describes the battle, but not from one point. It's not like rooting for one side. It's
Sure.
just
Sure.
it's a historical fiction because it is description of the battle. That's it. And it's really, really, really well done. And his son did the Gods and Generals and all that kind of stuff. And that's where it kind of goes off the rails a little bit. So,
Sure. Sure.
but yeah, it's like there is that fictional element, with Sharp's rifles and then Master and Commander, which is they're making a second movie of that thing.
I did not. That's
I'm
interesting.
hoping they use Russell Crowe and say he's just been on the island getting
Mhm.
fat for the last 20 years, and then they put him back on the boat. That would be amazing. But they're going to recast. Obviously, they're not going to use fat Russell Crowe
Yeah, I was gonna say Russell Crowe
as
probably
Jack
wouldn't.
Albury or whatever. But yeah, supposedly they're making another movie of it, or like another movie and series or whatever. But yeah, I'm excited about I'm excited about it. I'm excited. Hopefully, people will get a hold of it, have an open mind about its Napoleonics in a slightly different way.
Hmm.
I do. We do get some of the older, we call them grognards, older guys that are like, well, this is, like the way I want to play it. And I understand that. But this book is written for, older guys that want a different way to
Gamers.
play, and also younger gamers
Yeah.
that grew up gaming like 40K
Yep.
or Bolt Action or Flames of War or one of those games, and you can play this game and you understand. Blood and Plunder's like that too. It's a game. At the end of the
Yep.
day, it's a game. You're playing a game, and you're learning some stuff about history, which is kind of cool. And you could, get some ideas. And that's the cool thing about. We always talk about that too. Like I was talking about that with Eric, and even with Mike, is we're not writing history books. We're writing books with enough history in them to make you look at more history.
Mhm.
Like I do a whole chronological listing, but I'm not explaining whatever, going into
Yeah.
massive detail. One thing that I found really challenging was finding special characters that weren't generals, that weren't marshals,
Right.
that weren't Napoleon, but I was able to do it. I really dug. Like I found a Spanish naval commander, and like it's kind of cool. And like there was a drummer of Catalonia. He was in Barcelona. It was a little boy that was playing the drum, and all the Spanish were running, and he stood up he kept drumming and he didn't run, and then they all felt like embarrassed, and they went back and remanded.
Because this kid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's cool. Like you could add him into your force, like to make that. And for
Yeah.
some reason, all through this time period, there's a lot of women that like to run cannons. I don't like the French had a bunch in the Revolution. The Spanish had a bunch. Like they would like berate the men, like, "Where are you going? We got to," and then they would, come back and fight on the cannon. That's one little antidote to the Spanish gunners and the Spanish army. Because remember, we had the Spanish army and the guerrillas. They're kind of the
Yep.
guerrillas basically became armies as they
Yeah.
progressed, and they were literally like 10,000 guys in these units, and they got uniforms for the British, and they started functioning like actual armies. But in the Spanish regular army, which is the white coat guys, which is
Yep.
basically an army set up on the century before, they were very
Mhm.
anachronistic. Um, their gunners were hardcore to the end, dude. All veterans. They would not give up their guns for whatever reason. The Spanish gunners were like studs, and the rest of the army was like, not that good. But especially the cavalry. The cavalry was horrible because they just, you need a lot of support for good cavalry units.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so that's reflected in the game. You can bring a Spanish veteran gunners, and they don't run from the guns for whatever reason. It's just weird. They're like super macho. Like, hey, this is my gun. They don't leave. But,
I did not know that.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
I'm going to
yeah.
look into that.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
all
the
right,
French. Oh, one
we
other
could sit
thing.
here and
Oh, I
talk
thought
about
of one
history.
thing real quick. That's kind of cool. That's very different than Blood and Plunder. Cannonball skip. They skip. You
Woohoo!
skip
You don't
them in
just hit a
other
single
units.
guy.
The French were known for that, like skipping balls.
Yeah, that's what they're famous for.
And then you could skip it into another unit, which is kind of cool. Like you can
Woohoo!
actually, so that goes to gameplay. If you stack all your units up behind each other and put it in front of a cannon, you can hit all of them and just rip right through them. So, anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry. I just thought of that thing. It was just kind of different.
So my closing thought is I do think Napoleonic warfare was a very interesting case of rock paper scissors in a lot of ways because you have the loose troops who are weak to cavalry and then line troops are good against cavalry because of the square formation and blah blah blah. I do think it's a cool alternate take on Blood and Plunder. I'm
Mm-hmm.
very very excited. It's not really a take on Blood and Plunder, but it's obviously like you were saying before, it's like a cousin, of like a
Yeah,
similar
I'd
game.
say a cousin. Yeah.
So if you are a lover of Blood and Plunder and you have any interest in actual, like maybe more like proper military engagements, I think you would get a lot out of Blood and Bayonets. I'm beyond excited for it. I will definitely be making content for it. We will definitely be doing videos for it. We will definitely be doing episodes of it. And I think if you are even remotely interested in that kind of stuff, I really hope that you would join us. I want to thank you. This is going to be a long episode already. I can already tell it's good. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. We'll have to have you come on and maybe actually talk more like proper let's talk about the Battle of Victoria or whatever,
Oh
like
God,
little things like
don't
that.
do that. I'd have to read a
Oh
book.
yeah, dude. That's where the famous painting of all the French guys like running for their lives, like leaving all their stuff behind. And look, oh God, we gotta get the hell out of here. Oh God, Joseph Bonaparte, what a guy! What a guy that guy was.
Gotta love him, man.
A poor guy. He got. Okay, I'm not gonna get distracted. Okay, so thank you very much for hanging out with me. I really enjoyed this, and I think we talked about it. I think we talked about standing in lines and firing massive amounts of lead at each other, just like God intended.
Hey, one other thing I want to plug. I'm going to do a shameless plug.
Go for it.
I have a YouTube channel called Wargaming with Rufus.
Yep.
And in that channel, I break down the rules, I break down formations, I break down how units work, I break down like the concepts of what I'm trying to get at with the rules. So it might be, visual learners, or you might be like, hey, how does this work? You can actually go in there and look. And I also have some battle reports. When you mentioned battle reports, it brought it up. Is it the best? I tried. I started doing YouTube specifically for this. So there's, my audio is not as great as it should be, but I'm working on it, and trying to get it better. But if you want to check that, like I said, Wargaming with Rufus, you can check it out, and then it basically explains the rules in a visual format
Yep.
instead of
Sure does.
reading them. So I always do that when I get new rules. I like to read them and then see someone, and all right, I understood that. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Like so you don't get something wrong.
There's something to be said about seeing rules in motion, is the way I call it.
Yeah, yeah,
Like you
yeah.
could
But
read it, but you don't get it.
it makes it work better in your brain. Like that's why you watch battle reports, and
Yep.
in the beginning to learn the rules. Towards the end, you're learning like, oh, I didn't think of that way or this way, or look at
Right.
that, that's cool, or that combination. That's where it comes.
Well, like
That's
you
why
were saying with the 95th rifles firing in line before they scatter, is like that's like an interesting way
that's
to like
that's a
that's
Keegan
interesting.
Thomas Keegan's idea, but it works. You can
That's
do it within the rules. You can do it.
Gotta say, I
So
love that. So, guys, if you thought this was even remotely interesting, please give us a 5-star review. Helps expand the family, yada yada. You know all this stuff, the kitchen spiel. Definitely go check out Wargaming with Rufus. If I ever come down to Florida, which is pretty common since I still have Florida there, I have Florida in Florida. I have family down there. We're gonna have to record something. I might have to bring my French with me, and we'll start blasting
I
each
can,
other.
I can bring you into my tickle basement.
Oh my god, I love that too.
No. Yeah, man, you can come over. We can all play, dude. Of course,
I'm
Although
into that.
cigar smoking and drinking will be part of the event, so be ready.
I would expect nothing else. I have an odd fascination with the Poles in this era, so I'm definitely all about running Lancers and Vistula and
Oh
all
yeah,
that
they're
stuff.
in
So,
there. They're one of the Vista
oh, I'm
Legion.
excited.
All that's in there.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm ready to start running at people and start beating them to death. Oh, I'm excited. Oh yeah, baby. uh, yeah. So guys, thank you very much for listening to this. Give us that 5-star review if you can, and it help expand the family. And you can find me. I'm Dr. D, Dr.D. You can find me on Discord as Dr. D, Dr.D. If you have anything that you want us to talk about specifically, anything you want to watch me paint on the stream, any of that stuff, I'm very, very receptive to ideas unless it's dumb, in which case I'll say it's a good idea and then I'll leave you ghosted. What do you think about that? I wouldn't actually do that. I'm actually a pretty nice guy. So you can email me at furypainting@gmail.com. I do check it fairly sporadically. For some reason, I cannot get the notifications to just send it to my main email. I don't know why it doesn't work. I'm stupid. I'm sorry. I'm trying my best. And of course, we like to thank all the people in the background who keep the podcast running, Kara for helping with editing, and Tim for running the network. So, guys, I got to think of a different word. Usually for Race to Black, I say thanks for listening, Buccaneers. But you know what? This is the new one. So, thanks for listening, Grenadiers.
That's pretty good.
There you go. Make sure you keep your powder dry and you keep the wind to your back as you go forward. So we'll catch you next time and hope to hear from you soon. Bye.